If you go down in the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise.
I live in a small town, right on the edge of a very popular wooded area that attracts a number of paranormal investigators every year. There's been multiple stories of the weird things that go on in those woods. Black-eyed girl, pigman, cult activity, weird cemeteries, alien sightings, etc., etc. Most of the locals have witnessed something weird go on in those woods, which has widely been reported. But I wanted to talk about a few experiences I've had from living in the town first. I'll start with the experiences from my parents' house. So this town is an ex-miners community. Most of the town is now built on top of the old mines, including my parents' house. My parents' house is, in my opinion, 100% haunted. There's certain parts of the house that I won't go into on my own. So let's start from the beginning. We moved into this house back in 1999. Little things would happen, like things would go missing and turn up in weird places, but nothing major. Things started to pick up over time. One night my dad, who used to believe there was no such thing as ghosts, was up late doing paperwork. He heard footsteps on the stairs and thought it was my mum coming down. After they reached the hallway, they stopped. He thought this was a bit odd and was about to get up to see what was going on. That was when his glass of wine slid across the entire dining room table and smashed up against the wall. Another experience my dad had was when he fell asleep on the sofa and said he was thrown across the room and he heard a man's voice tell him to go to bed. Personal experiences that I've had in that house include seeing an apparition of some old-style boots walk behind me in the mirror, footsteps and voices heard in the hallway and dining room at night. The whole family has seen things move across tables and the fireplace. The thing that's creeped me out the most is that we have all seen the face of a man appear on the living room window. The front of my parents' house has a very long driveway, so we know it's not just someone walking past. We've all seen it, including visitors to our house, and everyone has described it in the same way. The one experience that sticks with me the most is the time I was washing the dishes in the kitchen. It was pitch black outside, but all the kitchen lights were on, and you could see into the hallway. I saw the reflection of what I thought was my dad walking past behind me. I even felt someone walk past behind me. He carried on walking into the next room, which is the downstairs toilet. I started talking to him and thought it was a bit rude he didn't answer me. I then walked into the living room to find my dad sitting there. I asked him why he didn't answer me, and his response was he hadn't moved from the living room all night. But I know I saw a man walk past me. The room that creeps everyone out is the dining room. This room is an extension onto the house, and there is an archway connecting to the next room. There is something about this room and that archway that unsettles everyone. This is where a lot of the apparition activity has been spotted, including shadows, footsteps, and just a general unsettling feeling. I have also experienced someone tapping on the window from the outside of the dining room while I was home alone. The outside of the window is the garden, which is only accessible through the back door of the house. There's so many experiences that I want to talk about, which happened in my hometown. I feel like this could be a few parts. I just want to point out I've been on a few local ghost hunts, and I've met a fair few mediums. They've all said that I'm a sensitive, which is apparently someone who isn't psychic but is able to sense and see more than the average person, which honestly would explain a lot because I have witnessed a lot of weird things. I visited my parents' house this evening for dinner, which reminded me of a few more experiences that I've had in the house. So, back when I was 18, I worked nights. I came home at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning with my now fiancée. We used to work together, which is how we met. We were always super quiet in the morning because everyone else was still in bed. We went straight into the kitchen as usual and clicked on the kettle to make a post-work brew before bed. I also forgot to point out in my last post that the very active dining room is the room attached to the kitchen, so you walk through it to enter the kitchen. Myself and my partner were quietly chatting away when we heard footsteps in the hallway, which entered the dining room and abruptly stopped. We both heard as clear as day a woman start laughing. We both whipped our heads around thinking it would be my mum, but obviously there was no one there. Everyone else in the house was still asleep in bed. The following evening when I woke up, I spoke to my mum about what had happened in the kitchen. She told me that she had also been experiencing weird things go on in the house that week. At this point, we were used to the spirit of the man that lived in our house, but this was something else. It felt sinister. The following weeks brought some odd activity in the house. I and the rest of the household on different occasions heard a little girl skipping and laughing in the hallway. Female whispers and crying could also be heard in the night. My mum went to see a friend after this, who was a psychic. She explained to my mum that this little girl had come into contact with her while in the local town. The girl had taken a liking to my mum and decided to follow her home. It wasn't the first time someone had come to see this psychic about this girl. Apparently she had followed a few people home. We decided to get the house cleansed to send this girl home. However, the male spirit that we have nicknamed John still remains in the house to this day. Although the spirit of the girl has now left the house, there was something very unsettling about it being there. That atmosphere at the time changed in the house, and everyone seemed on edge. Back in the day, I had a friend who lived next door to the local high school. I stopped over one night and refused to step foot in his house again. A bit of backstory. The school was built in the early 1900s. It's got a lot of history to it. I attended this high school growing up, just like nearly everyone in the town did. There were rumors of it being haunted, but most of the time everyone just put it down to it being a stupid story. Under the school was a number of tunnels that were originally built due to the Second World War as safety precautions. The tunnels are still used to this day for storage. The story goes that one of the students was murdered in those tunnels by a group of teenagers. However, I've never been able to find any truth to this story. So back to my friend's house. The layout of his house was very strange as it used to be a pub back in the early 1900s. We were upstairs in his room just talking. It was about 1 a.m. and it was just the two of us in the house. All of a sudden, through his bedroom window was a flash of light. This obviously caught our attention, so we peered out the window. Directly out of his window you could see the assembly hall of the school, which, for some reason, all the lights were turned on. I looked at him, as if to say what the hell is going on, and he said to me, "Just wait, you'll hear the singing in a minute." Lo and behold, we heard muffled singing coming from the hall. It carried on for about a minute and then abruptly stopped, and all the lights switched back off in the school. I asked him what the hell that was, and he replied, "It happens fairly often, I've gotten used to it." We put a film on to calm my nerves as to what had just happened. Around an hour had passed and we heard footsteps from outside his bedroom door, and it went eerily cold in his room. The pacing outside his door. Continued for just a minute and then stopped. I was terrified at this point, but he didn't look bothered by it at all. I told him to explain to me what on earth was going on. He said to me, "This house is haunted by 5 ghosts. The old lady who walks back and forth on the driveway, who could be seen through the kitchen window. She wore a scarf around her head and had a hunched back. The lady with no teeth, who would just stare at you, smile and then disappear. And the 2 children, who could be heard laughing and playing together." He said he was used to seeing them all, and they were harmless. He then paused, took a breath and said, "There is one more we call the tall man. He was the one outside the door. He would only appear when renovations were being made on the house. He didn't like change apparently, and he would make that known. Rooms where renovations were taking place would become freezing cold constantly. It didn't matter how warm the rest of that house was. That particular room would be stone cold. Things in the room would get thrown around at night, and someone could be heard pacing and stomping angrily about. The reason he was called the tall man was because of obvious reasons. My friend said he'd seen him twice and he was nearly 7 foot tall, in period clothing and wearing a top hat. After that night, he did say to me that he was unsure why he had made an appearance that night, as there was no renovation work taking place when I'd stopped there. We both got obsessed with trying to find out the history of that house, but couldn't find anything apart from the fact that it was an old pub. I wouldn't go back to that house after that night, and every time I would walk past the house on my way to school, I would get anxious and refuse to look at it. The town has a number of pubs, 2 of which are from the 1700s and still in use today. These 2 pubs are particularly very haunted, and I'll be writing about those in my next post. As mentioned in my last post, there's a couple of notorious pubs in my town that are known for their paranormal activity. I wanted to talk about a bit of the history, so settle in as this is going to be a long one. So let's get into it. The Cross Keys. The former coaching inn was built way back in 1746 and still stands and functions as a pub today. The infamous local serial killer, William Palmer, who poisoned a number of people, was said to be a regular, and there is a story of him poisoning one of his possible victims in that pub. The pub is known for cold spots, people's drinks moving, voices and footsteps in the cellar, and numerous accounts of shadow people. William Palmer was eventually caught and was hanged for his crimes. It is his spirit that people believe still wanders the pub. The 4 Crosses. If you're ever on the hunt for a truly terrifying experience, the 4 Crosses is the place to go. Declared as one of the most haunted pubs in Britain, the 4 Crosses was built in the 17th century, and again it still is used as a pub today. There's reports of a Roundhead soldier from the Civil War who is spotted in a ladies' toilet, as well as a woman called Emily who constantly cries. One of the locals from the early 2000s is said to have never left the pub after he died. A young man in the garage who committed suicide is also still residing here. The most common ghost is that of a little girl who is seen often in the downstairs bar. People report this as being the black-eyed girl from the local woods, but from my personal experience, it is not her. The 4 Crosses hosts ghost tours on a regular basis, one of which I attended a few years back. We got started on our night with the usual tour of the building before splitting off into smaller groups. About 6 of us were sitting in one of the bedrooms, asking the usual, "If there's anyone here, make yourself known," After a few minutes, the TV came on in the room and lit the room up with static, white noise. This obviously shit us all up. After a few seconds, it switched back off again. Upon investigation, we found that the TV wasn't even plugged in. None of us had a logical explanation as to how this had happened. We moved our investigation to the attic of the building. Just a bit more history for you here. The wood beams in the attic were originally beams taken from a ship, so the wood beams are older than the building. This was told to us after a couple of people in my group, myself included, said we felt a bit motion sick. Apparently, it was a regular occurrence in that room. So we got out the Ouija board to see if we could contact anyone. We did. We started talking to the little girl. She was scared and felt alone. She was trying to find her mother. She spelt out her name to us, Emily. We asked if she was buried in the cemetery across the road, and she said yes. A few people went over to the cemetery and actually found the grave of a little girl named Emily. Throughout the night, we conducted a number of investigations where we heard whispers, creaks, and odd noises. As we came to the end of the night, we placed a torch on the table, and we asked Emily to turn it on, to which it lit up extremely bright. This was actually caught on video. Everyone seems to have a story about the Four Crosses, and it is extremely haunted. It was one of the most active ghost hunts I've ever been on. It is close to the local woods, but people are unsure if they are connected. As I edge closer to talking about the infamous woods, I thought I'd talk about one of the oldest locations in the town, which lies just on the edge of the chase, Castle Ring. Castle Ring was originally thought to date back to the Iron Age. Although there is no defined date, the area is believed to be over 2,000 years old. Unfortunately, only the perimeter groundwork is there today. During the 12th or 13th century, a hunting lodge was built, the foundations of which are still visible. Rich in history, this small hill fort has a lot of stories behind it, from UFOs to werewolf sightings to the spirit of a nun, and as always, my own personal experiences of the place. So, let's get into it. Back in 2004, a local was driving past the car park that lies at the bottom of the Castle Ring when he spotted a hair-covered humanoid figure that crossed the road. Shocked by what he was witnessing, he slowed his car down and attempted to take a photo. He was quoted as saying it was about 7 feet tall, with short, shiny dark brown hair, a large head, and had eyes that glowed bright red. The spirit of a nun is also seen near Castle Ring, around where locals would collect water. I was unable to find her backstory. People are unsure if she drowned here, was murdered, or is just somehow connected to the area. The abandoned windmill that lies just up the road from Castle Ring also has a sad backstory. Local folklore suggested that this windmill was built on an old, pagan burial ground, which would suggest why it's so active. 2 children also suffocated in the flour silo, who are still reported to be active in the area to this day. The legend also tells of a tall black shadow-like figure that was spotted as the children suffocated, which is possibly the same shadow humanoid that was seen back in 2004. Earlier this year, while stuck in lockdown, I decided to take the dog for a walk as part of my daily allowed out once a day for exercise. I hadn't been up Castle Ring for years, so thought it would make a nice change to my usual walk. It was raining, so I knew hardly anyone would be out. I parked up and noticed my car was the only one there. I didn't think much of it, as this year has been a whole load of weird. I started walking around the perimeter on the allocated path. As the path dipped into more of an enclosed wooded area, I started to feel very uneasy. I took off my headphones as something didn't feel right. My eyes started darting left to right as I felt like something was watching me. My dog, who loves everyone and everything, started snarling and barking at something in the woods. At this point, I decided to go straight back to my car. I picked up the pace and walked back on myself, constantly looking around. Out of the corner of my eye, something caught my attention. I snapped my head back around to catch what looked like a black shadow darting behind one of the trees. I ran back to my car and drove as quick as I could away from that area. I now remember why I hadn't been up there in years. The last time I was up there, myself and a couple of friends witnessed strange-looking lights in the sky. The whole area just made me feel uneasy, and even thinking about it gives me chills. I know I'm not the only one to have experienced weird things go on up there, and I certainly won't be the last. I thought it was about time I spoke about the woods. Stretching for 30 miles, Cannock Chase truly is a stunning place to go in the day. If you're stupid enough to wander up there in the night, make sure you don't go alone. However, just because you go in the daytime, don't think the light will protect you. The spirits and demonic entities of the chase are known to make an appearance throughout the day. In the 60s, 2 girls between the ages of 5 and 6 were murdered. Their bodies were found on the part of the chase that is known as Birch's Valley. This bit of history is important, so keep it in mind. So let's get into it. The most famous spirit that haunts the chase is that of the black-eyed girl. She doesn't appear very often, but when she does, it causes a meteor storm. Back in 2014, a local was flying his drone over a dense, wooded area of Birch's Valley. It was there he captured what looks like a girl with black eyes, floating between the trees. Footage is available on YouTube. It had been 30 years since the last sighting of this girl, but no one knows why there was such a long gap in the sightings. When sightings take place, a piercing scream of a girl can be heard. People flock towards the noise, thinking a child is in danger. No older than 10, the girl is known to stand there with her hands covering her eyes. She will then lower her hands and reveal the coal black pits that she has for eyes. And within the blink of an eye, she will disappear back into the woods. Every person that has witnessed her has given the same account. She does the same thing over and over. She will also only appear in the daytime. So the murders that I was on about at the beginning of the post, some people believe that the black-eyed girl is the spirit of one of these little girls. It is said that around the time of the murders, another 7-year-old girl went missing, but her body has never been found. Just a bit more to add to this story that's slightly more close to home. Around 15 years ago, my father-in-law was driving back from work. He drove through the chase, just as many people do every day on their commute. He drove down a long stretch of road through Birch's Valley. He looked in his rearview mirror to see 2 very young girls sitting in the back of his car. He slammed on his brakes and swerved his car. He came to a stop and checked the back seat again. Nothing. The girls had disappeared. He explained to me in much detail what the girls looked like, from the color of their hair down to the clothes they were wearing. He is convinced to this day that the spirit of those little girls who were murdered had made their way into his car. The chase is covered in paranormal activity, from the demonic pigman to the copious amounts of spirits reported to have been seen. I love going up there for the beauty of the area. but it always feels as if I'm being watched. Local folklore talks about a horrendously creepy-looking creature that stalks people of the chase. Ask a local about the pigman. They'll smile and tell you the story, as if it were just a ghost story to tell children. Ask them to go into the depth of Cannock Chase with you, and you'll see the look of horror take over their face. The story goes that a woman who was accused of witchcraft became pregnant. She didn't want to bring shame on her family by having a child out of wedlock, so she went deep into the woods to give birth. When her child was born, it was horrendously disfigured, supposedly due to the corruption of her practicing in witchcraft. She offered her child up to the woodland in hopes that she would be forgiven for the evil she had done. It's said she returned to the village where she soon died from a flu-like illness, taking her secret about her child to the grave with her. A few years later, people started to report a humanoid-like creature that had facial features that resembled a pig. He would watch the children from the village while he stood in the tree line, sulking. After a number of children went missing and livestock had been gruesomely killed and thrown around the farmland, the village soon became abandoned and reclaimed by the woods. Centuries went by when the local scout club was camping over the chase, close to where the abandoned village was. The scout leader recalled the story of the pigman. He told the scouts that if they sing a certain song, Pigman would appear. So they all stood around the campfire and summoned Pigman. He is said to have appeared and murdered all of the group apart from one boy. From that day, the Pigman has been known to roam the woods once again. Now, there's absolutely no proof to back up this story, which is why a lot of people state it as folklore. However, there has been numerous accounts of people seeing a man that stands in the tree line, with unusual facial features. People have gotten close enough to see his demonic mutated face. It's then that he will run back off into the tree line, making a blood-curdling high-pitched noise, described as a pig squeal. Unusual footprints have been found in the area, yet no one can work out what animal it's meant to belong to. There has been a number of people report that in the evening, just as the sun is going down, as the chase is quiet and calm, a distant, high-pitched pig squeal can be heard from deep in the woods. Cannock actually has a large number of pagans that live in the area. It's something that's always seemed to have been part of this town. However, it's a well-known fact that cults and those who delve into dark witchcraft have practiced it on Cannock Chase. Could the pigman be a result of witchcraft? Or is this entity something else entirely? This will probably be my last post about Cannock Chase. I still have more stories about the chase, but those are more UFO related. Tonight I wanted to delve into Gaskin's Wood, part of the chase that lies between Hednesford Hills and Cannock Chase. This small wooded area has a sorrowful backstory. Back in the First World War, a couple lived so close to the woodlands. The husband went off to fight and the wife was left at home. Months later, the letters stopped coming and the wife believed her husband had died in the war. She moved on and started a relationship with one of her neighbors. She soon fell pregnant. The husband suddenly returned home from war, and upon finding out about his wife being pregnant, he murdered her in a fit of rage. It is said he dragged her body out into the garden and left her rotting there for 2 days while it snowed. He then took her to the woods where he chopped her up into tiny pieces and scattered her body. Eventually, after she was reported missing, he confessed to his crimes. The police were unable to locate her, and the husband agreed to show them where she was. He took them to part of the woods where a water container was, of which he showed the police her head. He had stuffed it between a water container and a pipe. The rest of her body was never found. The woods is named after her murder. Their last name was Gaskin, hence Gaskin's Wood. This part of the woods is a popular area for teenagers to camp, and I spent a number of weekends over there when I was younger. I used to cut through these woods on my way home and always felt on edge walking through there. Sometimes I would run through it just to get through the woods quicker. Then, one night, myself and a group of friends camped up there. We were pretty loud that night, and we were all just having a laugh, being usual teenagers. As the night drew on, we all eventually retired back to our tents. Around 4 a.m., we were woken by the noise of a woman wailing and crying around the campsite. A couple of us got out of the tent to see what was going on, but there was nothing. We stood about, reassuring each other that we weren't going mad, and that we all heard it. It was quiet. The air went still. No birds, no rustling of trees from animals, nothing. It was eerie. That's when my friend went pale, his eyes looking straight behind me. He whispered, What is that? What is that?" We turned around to see a woman, battered and bruised, wearing a white nightdress, crying. But the thing that made us all stand there in shock and unable to speak was the fact that we could see right through her. And, just like that, she vanished, right in front of us. It's safe to say we quickly packed up everything and were home by 6 a.m. It's been around 10 years since I've stepped foot in that part of the woods, and you couldn't pay me to spend a night there again. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.